Good evening. I'm Rebecca Jennings. Welcome to another episode of A Walk in the Dark. This week I'm speaking with Diana Porter. I understand you had a very scary encounter. Is that correct?
Yes. At times I still think that it didn't really happen. It makes no sense to me that what I went through could really occur and the things that I saw could exist in our world. We feel safe and comfortable in our lives, but we don't realize there's an underworld that exists. We watch movies about it and laugh it off after the movie's over, and some of us are scared for a short time, but we move on. But what happened to me doesn't allow me to move on. It really happened. At times I feel like I've lost my mind and I need to talk to someone.
Have you talked to someone, a counselor perhaps, to help you make sense of what happened to you?
I did.
It seems to me it didn't help you overcome your frightening encounter. You have the appearance of one who is still haunted.
Well, if you saw what I saw, you wouldn't have overcome it either.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You don't have to continue with this interview if you wish to stop.
No, I'm here now. I can go on. I guess I need to start at the beginning. I've been planning a trip to northern Canada for 2 years. I was so excited because I'd always heard how beautiful and quiet it is up there. And I needed a change from the fast life in New York City. I'd been living there for 4 years.
You're a writer, is that correct?
Yes, I'd been working on an article about the supernatural, the paranormal, or whatever you want to call it, unexplained activity. I never believed in such nonsense, but I had to write about it for the online magazine Supernatural World. It's a study on the concept of good versus evil and which was stronger. Well, I wasn't making much progress in New York, so a friend suggested that I go up north to Canada, which was perfect because, as I mentioned, I've been planning a trip up north. I found that the further away I got from the city, my mind became sharper. I rented a cabin in North Bay, Ontario, which was absent of any human life except for the owner of the campgrounds and his wife. Oh, there was a family who lived there in a house further back in the woods. The wife who lived there with her husband and 2 children was a caretaker, and her husband worked further up as a logger. It was so quiet there, with trees all around. It was so far back in the woods you didn't hear anything except the wildlife that lived in every square inch of the woods. I would sit outside every day and write. The subject matter of my writing made me feel uneasy. It was very creepy material. I made a friend outside as I worked, which helped me take my mind off the strange subject matter of the supernatural. A squirrel always sat up on the limb above me and threw acorns at me. So I got an idea and began to leave popcorn on the ground while I was working. He loved the popcorn so much he would come down from the tree and eat it next to me. I'm getting off the subject, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
So, I felt I needed a break from my writing. I was developing writer's block. I heard about this place further up north called Moosonee. You could take a train from Cochrane to Moosonee, which is at the mouth of James Bay. I heard it was very isolated with beautiful undeveloped land. The train ran on one track up to Moosonee and then back to Cochrane. This small trip would give me a chance to clear my mind and continue writing. I got up early in the morning, around 1:30 a.m., and decided to go to Cochrane to board the train to Moosonee by 5 a.m. I got dressed in a pair of jeans and a pullover blouse. As I opened the door to the cabin, I saw a large black bear walking around near the front door. I was scared out of my mind. I'd never seen a real live bear in the wild. I quickly closed the cabin door and tried to decide what to do. I knew I had to leave very soon or I'd miss the train. There was only that one train that went there and back once a day. I tried to leave the cabin several times, but that bear was still there. It was like he was trying to keep me from going. I mustered up the courage, and I ran out of the cabin as fast as I could and got into the car. I started the car up, and I got the hell out of there.
It seems like the bear didn't want you to leave.
Yeah, it did seem that way. I never thought about that possibility until I returned back to the cabin.
Did you make it on time for the train?
I did. It was a lonely drive to Cochrane. That early in the morning, it was pitch black. There were no lights along the 2-lane road. There were no visible houses either, only a dot of light coming from a far distance that could be seen every now and then. I wasn't sure if it was a house light because they were so far away. A semi-truck would pass by in either direction, but that wasn't frequent. I was really uncomfortable. I was engulfed in darkness. I felt totally isolated. I decided to turn on the radio to ease the tension. I was listening to a program that featured radio plays. They were very comforting, but I still had this creepy feeling like I was being watched. Not to mention, I would see these pair of eyes alongside of the road. Just kept hoping each time that there was only a small animal trying to cross the road.
You're a brave one. I would have turned the car around and went back to that cabin.
I thought about doing that, but I was more worried about that bear who could be outside the cabin waiting for me.
I understand that. So you finally arrived in Cochrane.
Yeah, I did. I must have been late because I didn't see anyone. They'd already boarded the train. There wasn't that many people on the 3-car train. I just talked it up to low tourist season. Most of the people were friendly, but there was an older woman who sat next to me. She wanted to know all about me. She started to get on my nerves because all I wanted to do was to take pictures of the beautiful scenery. She finally got up and went to the restroom, and I never saw her again. She may have gone to another car. I just remember being so relieved because now I could take pictures in peace.
I remember you telling me something strange happened while you were taking pictures through the train window.
Yes, I was taking a picture of the landscape, this beautiful river, and I noticed a dark figure appeared behind me from the window. I turned around. There was nothing there. Everyone was sitting in their seats enjoying the view from their own windows. So I just threw it off as nothing and continued taking pictures. But then I saw the dark figure again. I immediately turned, and then there was this man standing behind me. I gave a sigh of relief, and he noticed my anxiety and apologized for scaring me. There was an empty seat next to me, so he sat down and began to talk about where he'd come from and why he was on the train.
Where did he come from, and why was he on the train?
He said he was from New Orleans. He went on to say he always had an interest in the far north country of Ontario. He loved the deep, rich, unspoiled territories of the world and how they hold mysteries inside their fertile grounds. He also said he loved meeting people who were like-minded, people like himself who'd love the freedom of the great wild wilderness. He went on to say that one day he was going to write a book about his journey and his interviews with all the people he met.
So, you eventually began to tell him about yourself?
Yes, I did. He took an interest in everything I had to say, especially when I started telling him about my night terrors, which started as a child and continued to adulthood. They were about being lost in the woods. I told him how I tried to run, but I couldn't, and I was being drawn closer to something horrible. Then his interest changed, and it seemed like he was uncomfortable. He quickly said it was nice talking to me, and he got up and left.
Did you find that very strange, that he would leave so quickly?
Well, yeah, I did, at first, but if I had to sit next to someone telling me about some strange dream like that, I wouldn't want to sit next to him either.
Did you see him again on the train after that?
No, but I did see him every now and then when we were walking around at each stop. He just stood there, watching me, and then he'd walk away. He kept a good distance away from me, which led me to believe he was a little leery of me. Then a strange thing began to happen. The people began to distance themselves from me, too. No one looked at me or anything. I felt so alone. I wanted to leave and get back to the cabin, but it was 600 miles away, so I just sucked it up and continued on.
What happened when you were on the lake in Moosonee?
Well, I boarded a boat that held about 12 others from the train, and we crossed over to the town called the Moose Factory. When I was walking along the path to view the oldest church in Ontario, I heard noises coming from the woods. There were movement in the trees and the sound of footsteps following me. I heard voices. Some were counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over. Some were whispers that kept saying my name. Also, there was a strange sound I can't describe. All I know was it was the most frightening sound I've ever heard in my life. Tree branches were bending down towards me as I walked by the trees. I ran as fast as I could to the church. When I got inside the church, closeness formed around me. I felt like I was being squeezed and I couldn't breathe. I ran from the church as fast as I could. I reached the train and I realized that no one was there. So I found my seat and just sat there and waited for the train to head back to Cochrane. I was frozen there in my seat for some time. Then all of a sudden, the train lurched forward and started to move quickly at a high speed like it was traveling at the speed of light, and everything became blurred. I saw streaks of light passing before me, and before I knew it, I was back at the boarding train at Cochrane. Several hours had passed in a matter of seconds. When I tried to get up, my legs were weak, and I had to set up for a moment to recover myself. When I looked around the train car, there were people everywhere, leaving the train and headed for their cars. I didn't look at anyone as I hurried off the train. I was hungry, but I didn't want to order anything because I became afraid of everyone. But I did break down and order a large, strong black coffee so that I could stay awake while I drive back to North Bay. I prayed that there wasn't anything in my coffee that would cause me to hallucinate or be cast under some spell or something unexplainable.
So, as I understand it, you did arrive back to the cabin, but you did experience something unexplainable. Would you like to talk about that if you could?
I really don't want to, but I will with reservations. Well, as I said, I ordered a strong black coffee for my drive back. I hoped it would last through the 4-hour drive, so I just took small sips. It was so quiet, so I decided to turn on the radio. There were only programs that aired radio plays. At that time, there were only a few radio stations that far north. So I started to listen to a story about this girl who had encounters with a strange man.
It sounds like your own encounter with the man on the train.
Yes, it does.
You can continue with the story.
Oh, yeah. Well, she went on to say how this man begins to transform into something. His hands and feet started to grow into hooves that were split, and his body changed into a hairy animal-shaped creature. His head became hideous-looking with horns and red-flamed eyes. The girl asked him who he was. The creature responded, saying in a loud voice, "I am the devil." The girl screamed, and I quickly turned off the radio. I was out of my mind with fear. Here I was alone in this car driving down a completely dark wooded area with no one in sight for miles, and I just happened to be listening to some weird story about a man turning into the devil. I put the pedal to the metal and I tried to get back to North Bay as soon as possible. I didn't want to find anything else on the radio for fear I would land on another horror story. As I went along, I began to feel very sleepy. So I kept drinking more coffee, which then made me had to go to the restroom. Well, this was impossible because there was no stops from Cochrane to North Bay. There was no way I was going to stop and relieve myself on the side of the road. Along the way, on the side of the road, I kept seeing these small, glowing eyes. But when I got closer to them, I realized there were only foxes and raccoons. I even saw a moose. It was huge. I'd never seen one before. They're really beautiful creatures. Anyway, as I was driving, I started to nod off for a few seconds, but then I came fully awake when I saw these white, glowing eyes in front of me. I thought it was another moose that wandered onto the road. I slowed the car down because I didn't want to hit it while it was standing there. I thought it would move as I got closer, but it didn't. The thing's eyes began to move upward and became larger and a more intense red, yellowish color. I became frightened and I turned the car around and sped up as fast as I could. The thing appeared in front of me again. I panicked and started to drive the car wildly until I ran off the road into a ditch. For several moments, I wasn't aware of my surroundings. Then I heard this horrible noise and a loud crashing sound. I quickly got out of the car and began to run wildly through the woods with no sense of direction.
You had no idea what this thing could have been. I know some people have said they have seen Bigfoot. Do you think it may have resembled a creature like that?
No. This thing started to grow larger and larger in the middle of the road, and its eyes were changing different colors. I kept running until I saw lights off in the distance. I felt relieved because I'd come to civilization. There'd be houses there and I could get help. I became exhausted. I didn't think I could make it to the houses, but I kept going. As I was running, I kept hearing loud, heavy footsteps following me. I felt the ground beneath me rumbling with each step. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. I had to go on. As the lights grew larger and closer, I began to realize there were a large circle of tall white flame torches and a large fire pit in the center that was also burning with white flames leaping from it. I stopped in my tracks and just stared at this strange sight before me. I also realized that the footsteps behind me had stopped.
What did you think this thing was?
At first, I thought maybe it was some sort of community gathering, but there wasn't anyone there. There was this massive wooded area all around. I heard nothing. It was so very quiet. No insects, frogs, nothing. There wasn't a star in the sky. It was pitch black. The thought came to me, maybe I was dead and I was about to be judged by a higher power. I sensed this place was very evil. I can't explain how terrified I was. Then people began to appear from the woods, heading toward me. They wore long, dark, hooded robes. I wanted to run, but I was frozen in that spot. My legs wouldn't move. I tried and tried with all my might. As the group of hooded ones got closer, I could see their faces. The larger one, leading the others, was the man I saw on the train who was asking me questions. He just stood there, looking and smiling at me with these eyes that had a pale green light emitting from them. The faces of the hooded group behind him became clearer, and they were the other people from the train. They were chanting something in a soft, low voice. The only words I could make out were my name and that I was the chosen one. I found my voice and said, "Let me go. I don't belong here." The man before me said, "You can't leave, my mother. You are the chosen one. You are our new mother who will bring forth a new generation of many believers. They will be a stronger and determined generation who will take over the world. Only you alone can do this alongside our Father." The chanting stopped. There wasn't a sound. Then the chanting began again. It grew louder and louder. The wind started to blow and grew stronger. The torches and the pit of fire became brighter. I felt my body lift from the ground and I started to levitate towards the pit of fire. I had no feeling at all in my body as I hovered over the pit. I became lethargic and willing to give in to whatever was going to happen next. I had no control of the powers over me. I could only see what was before me. I could hear everything. I saw a disturbance of the trees as they began to bend. Something large was moving through the woods, coming closer towards me. Then I saw these evil, multicolored but mostly reddish eyes looking at me. This hideous creature walked to the pit as flames leaped into its mouth. As I looked down, I could see that the pit of fire was in the middle of a large pentagram. The creature had long curved horns and a long hairy body that was half animal, half man, with long claws at the end of its hands. It stood over me with this hideous grin. My body began to rise up to it, getting closer and closer. The chanting increased. I heard my name many times, along with the phrase, "Our Mother of Darkness." I began to feel myself being taken over. I was becoming something else. I was relishing in this new being I was becoming. I felt free and powerful. The creature reached out to me and I reached out to it. Then, from a distance, not far away, came a loud roar. I heard the sounds of many forest animals as if they were in distress. I saw this huge black bear creature emerge from the trees. It was larger than the evil thing before me. It opened its mouth and let out the most deafening sound. The evil creature turned away from me and headed for the bear creature. The two fought wildly, destroying everything in their path. The sounds they made were horrible. It was so loud I thought my eardrums would explode. My head throbbed with pain and my eyes felt like they were being ripped from their sockets. My body had the feeling of being torn apart as the battle continued between the two creatures. I hurt so badly, I screamed from pain. I knew at any minute I was going to die. I didn't. The flames below me swirled around violently. The people below were chanting faster and harder. Marks appeared on my arms and legs as strings of fire from the evil creature lashed at them. The strings of fire began to curl around my limbs and were getting tighter and tighter. At that point, I wanted to die. I wouldn't withstand the terror I was going through. The evil creature had managed to take hold of the bear creature and had overpowered it. the evil one turned to me and told me to cast the bear creature away, and then I will be free of all my pain. It said, "My world is yours to do with as you wish. You will be the most powerful mother of all. You know what is right, my Diana." The chanting below changed to, "Free yourself. Cast it away, mother." I was confused. I didn't know what to do. Should I do what this thing wanted me to do, or take a chance on the bear creature and see what will happen? As I struggled with what to do, I began to wonder, what was this power, this thing that wanted me to join it? What and who are these people below me? How could I be a mother to them and to the world? This flame-eating creature was something from the dark world. How could I want to be a part of something so evil and hideous? It's not right to control a world and to use people for their own purpose. But how do I know which one of these things were good and which one was evil? Or could both of them be evil? I just shouted out, "God, help me! I don't know what to do!" As I stayed suspended in midair, a cold wind began to blow through the woods. The wind swirled around, and the flames began to dissipate. The people below withered away. The bear creature gained strength and ripped off the evil creature's head, which rolled into the pit of fire. And then the bear creature hurled the remains of the evil creature into the pit. The flames became less intense as they fell down into the pit. The ground shook as the pit closed up and was no longer visible. I began to fall towards the ground, but the bear creature reached out and caught me into its massive paws. It was the most comforting feeling I'd ever experienced in my life. And before I knew it, I fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how much time had passed, but I found myself in the car on the side of the road. It was as if everything I'd experienced had never happened, as if I stopped the car and just took a nap. There were no marks on my body. The car suffered no damage when it ran off the road. Everything was just as it was before, except for what was still in my head. Was it a dream, or did it really happen? I'll never forget what I went through. I know this really happened to me. Dreams aren't that realistic.
Wow. I don't know what to say. Did you experience anything after that?
I didn't experience anything like that, but I did come across some interesting events.
Such as?
Well, I later learned from the cabin owner that the Polar Bear Express had not been running for about 2 weeks, and that there was no way I could have been aboard that train that day. So I did some research, and for sure it had been out of service the time I was supposed to have been on it. I couldn't begin to wrap my head around that theory, so I just didn't think about it anymore. Perhaps I wasn't in Cochrane and I ended up somewhere else. Maybe I was half asleep and made a wrong turn or something. Anyway, who knows? Strange things do happen.
Oh, so when you arrived at the cabin, were you able to get back to normal?
I don't know if you would call this normal or not, but it was still dark when I arrived back to the cabin. I pulled into the parking space. The high beam lights were still on, and I saw the black bear again. It was standing there in front of the car as if it was waiting for me to return. As I turned the car off, the bear stood up on its hind legs with its front paws up. It lowered itself and walked off into the woods.
And was that the last time you saw the bear?
No, I managed to finish the article about good versus evil with little effort. Then it was time for me to head back home. When I left the cabin, I'd driven about half a mile when I saw the bear at the side of the road. It raised itself on its hind legs with its paws up as if it were wishing me farewell.
Well, it seems like the bear was kind of like your protector during your journey through that evil realm.
Yes, it appears that way. It fought for me. It saved my life. I just had to believe that good wins over evil.
This has been a Little Beth Media production. The Thing in the Woods, written by Evonne Fields-Gould, featuring the voice talents of Morgan Sharpley as Diana and Evonne Fields-Gould as Rebecca.